Yeah, for me, the most difficult thing about marriage was realizing that my wife had needs. I didn't
Yeah.
expect that. No one prepared me. I'm joking, but I'm not really. Like it's realizing that you're in a relationship with somebody who isn't just there to give to you. And it's been said so often that perhaps now we're maybe unable to hear it, and that's that we often go to a spouse seeking God, the
Yes.
fulfillment of all my desires.
Yes. Yeah.
Christopher West put it well. He said, "Don't hang your coat on a hook that was never meant to hold the weight.
Yeah.
Don't bring your desires and needs to a human being that cannot actually fill up the God-shaped hole in your heart, because you will crush her."
Yeah.
You hear that, every person, who's perhaps a Christian would nod. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
But then what happens in marriage is you begin to understand that analogy at different levels.
Yes.
To the point where you realize you didn't even understand it when you said you understood it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and so much of that is about communication. So we were talking about earlier about empathy and how your wife maybe has an inner world that's as real as yours, but she has to in the way we are in kind of this fallen state, her inner world is kind of opaque to me. I can't see it. I can't know it directly. She has to communicate
Reveal
it to
it.
me. And that is a struggle. And likewise, I have to communicate my motivations and my desires and my feelings to her, which is also a struggle. Like we have to work through this medium called language. It's like a symbol for our inner life. And a successful communication bridges that gap between human beings and brings them, like successful communication brings you into communion with someone else's inner world. So communication and communion have the same root word of communio. Like it's a union based on a successful communication of my inner life to you. And when you understand that, we are brought into union with each other. We understand each other at a soul level. But again, it has to happen through this medium of language, at least for now.
Yes. And what is a term? Like a term, it's the intellectual abstraction of the essence of a thing. And it's the thing you're trying to convey with the term. It's the concept, right?
Yeah, right.
Or is the concept's the intellectual abstraction?
Yeah.
But the term is like the packaging.
Right.
It's like, here's a box and there's something in it. And it's the meaning. And we often don't even hear each other because we're using terms and meaning something else by them. That's another thing I'm starting to find frustrating with my children, and I wish that I wouldn't fall into this. And that's that so often I find that my children aren't trying to understand each other. So here's a very simple example. My daughter and son and I were watching a Bob Ross painting the other day. And my son said, "It looks ugly right now." And his point was, it's going to look beautiful later. But isn't that interesting? That's what he was trying to convey.
Yes.
My daughter jumped on him and, "It's not ugly. You shouldn't say that it's ugly." I'm like, "Oh, for the love. Like, try to understand what it is he was trying to say."
Yeah.
And this happens a lot with children. It's almost like, why don't you Thomas Aquinas? Like, why don't you reformulate? Did you mean this?
Yeah.
And we should be doing that with our wives, because I don't know about you, but you get into an argument with your wife. Are you even listening? And then you recount word for word what she just said.
Yeah.
But that doesn't prove that you were listening.
Right.
Actually.
Yeah.
What do you think she meant by that?
Yeah. Well, and that is an exercise that you can do with couples in like couples therapy, is like you take like an object like this and you pass it back and forth so that each person has a clear turn to talk. But when the person says like, when you did this, I felt this. And the other person, when they respond, they can't fire back with, "Well, you misunderstood," or they have to articulate exactly what they heard the other person saying before they respond. So when you did this, I felt this. Okay, and then the husband has to say, "What I heard you saying is this." And then that gives the wife an opportunity to say, no, that's not what I meant. That wasn't the meaning I was trying to convey.
This is the disputed questions.
Yeah.
This is what Thomas Aquinas does in the Summa Theologiae.
He's a therapist. No,
He's a therapist.
Yeah.
He's a universal therapist. Yeah, that's fascinating. Like, think about how much more progress we would see in presidential debates if they had to do what the scholastics had to do, namely, reiterate your position to your satisfaction before I then respond to it.
Yes.
Those debates would be way more boring, but way more helpful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Communication is a struggle. And I don't think it was always that way. Prior to the fall, I think we knew each other intimately, immediately. As the angels can intuit things directly, they don't have to struggle through the medium of discursive logic or things like that. It's an intuitive, direct knowing. And I think in paradise, it will be a restoration of that, where we can know each other's inner life immediately and intuitively. We won't have to struggle with this barrier of symbolic communication that we call language. But until then, it's a spiritual exercise to strive to understand someone else. But it can be an incredibly holy and helpful thing. So,
yeah. I was not listening towards the end of your sentence, speaking of communication, because I was thinking about something to ask you. I'm sorry. You're writing a book called Learning to Love.
Yeah.
Did you get into this kind of stuff in that?
Yeah, no, it's about all of these things that we've just been talking about marriage. I mean, it's really the fruit of a couple of years of meditation just on the meaning of marriage as a sacrament. Cardinal Burke has this incredible quote that he just tossed off in an interview several years ago, but it really struck me as incredibly profound. He said, one of the greatest forces against evil in the world, second only to the Eucharist, is the love of a man and woman in marriage. One of the greatest force against evil in the world.
Amen.
Second only to the Eucharist is the love of a man and woman in marriage. And I thought, how many Catholics just dismiss their marriage as something secondary? Well, my real vocation is my job or my apostolate or whatever your thing is. And marriage is just kind of the background, it's just there. And sure, yeah, it's a sacrament in some sense, but it's not really helping me grow in the spiritual life. I mean, it's not really giving me any graces or anything. It doesn't feel like it anyway. It's kind of chaotic and kids have all these needs and people are screaming and crying and my wife's upset with me. And it doesn't feel very holy. It feels very mundane, actually. And so we lose the kind of spiritual depth of the marriage relationship. And so I kind of wanted to write a spiritual meditation on marriage that really encapsulates a lot of the themes that we've been talking about here, but really walks through step by step human relationships and how we can grow through them, especially the most intimate, the most potentially provocative, but potentially sanctifying relationship of marriage, where you're living in close contact with someone every day of your life. That's either going to make you bitter or better, but it's not going to leave you the same. And so just really meditate on that let's take our marriages seriously. Let's strive for holy marriages, holy Catholic homes, because it really is the foundation of really everything. And it is a profound, where do priests come from? Priests come from holy Catholic families. Where do nuns come from? Where do all the other holy orders and roles and vocations in the church? They all come from families. We all originate in a family. Holy families breed a holy church in a holy world. Broken families lead to a broken church and a broken world. So it all goes back to the family. It's a profound sacrament. St. Paul calls it, in the Vulgate, the magnum sacramentum, the great sacrament. It's the mystery, the great mystery of Christ in the church, which there's few things more profound than that. And if we can kind of plumb the depth of that and understand just how significant our marriages can be, not only in the temporal economy, but also in the spiritual economy, it can really change everything for our Catholic families.
If you like that clip, be sure to like and subscribe. Cheers.